Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
So, guys, we're going to go into the Gnostic point of view again and talk about and perhaps share some information coming from Sophia. As Sophia is one of our guides now that has joined our group on a regular basis. Sophia means wisdom, and it's wisdom coming from the divine feminine.
She is the energy of our heart chakra. She is that essence of love, caring, understanding. She's that voice inside of us that gives us a new understanding of things, that ability to look at things at a different angle, a different perspective. She's very nurturing, very caring, very loving, very inviting.
Absolutely. We've talked to the guides countless times, multiple times a day. Cindy was doing multiple channelings every single day, really, and we have so much that we still have basically categorized, but we have to share. One thing that they have made very, very clear is that there is no one right philosophy, per se. As you see this, which of the 30,000 Protestant denominations is the true Church of God? The answer is, well, none. It could be all in some ways, but nobody has it right. It depends on where your heart is. And what we've gotten from the guides when we've talked to, for instance, the Galactic Federation and our contact Laurel, and I was asking her about the Sanatana Dharma, she said, well, of all the philosophies that you have out there, that is probably the most accurate to the way the universe really is. There are some lines of Gnostic thinking that can give you a lot of illumination and how things really are as well. Again, nothing that humans have devised is really perfect. It's not. There is no one perfect system. If we're looking for the one perfect system, it doesn't exist. One of the reasons is because we're each unique. We're absolutely unique individual pieces of that God source spark, and we are all looking at things from a little different lens.
I believe it's very important that we understand ourselves to be unique and different. And we are an expression of source that is not to be put in a box or outlined or defined. I do believe that a lot of religions bring understanding. I think people want to understand. They have this longing, desire to try to understand, why do I do this? Why do I do that? And why does this happen and that happen? And I think in that sense, that's when these studies come to be very valuable to help bring us some understanding. But that's just exactly that. You should be able to go from one study to the next to find different understandings, because there is no one size fits all in any circumstance.
When I look at this picture, for one, I see the tree of life written on this from the Kabbalah, the pillars of mercy and severity, so to speak. And you could see this. You can also see aspects of the higher self so clearly intertwined, heading up towards source. And also you could take a look at the polarity and the yin and the yang. There's so much here that's in this one particular beautiful painting, drawing that gives us a glimpse at our reality. Gnosticism, again, is a very, very interesting philosophical system and point of view. The early church was peppered with so many people of the Gnostic persuasion, and it wasn't until the Council of Nicaea in 325 A.D. That the persecution of the Gnostics really truly started in earnest, and then everything was basically called a heresy and was destroyed as much as possible. It's very much reminiscent of Nazi Germany with their book burnings. The Gnostics held that the essential nature of the human is divine. They look upon men and women as gods and goddesses who have forgotten who they are. Very interesting. That's exactly what we see in the Sanatana Dharma and when we look at the different yugas. In the Golden Age, men and women are just like the gods. Really not much difference there. We can do amazing things. We live extremely long lives. We're full of benevolence and love, and we interact in a harmonious way. And so that is our natural state of being, so to speak. It's from this predicament that the Gnostic aspires to be freed by Gnosis. And what is Gnosis? Well, Gnosis is knowing in an experiential way. Like if you looked at a roller coaster and you said, that looks really scary, but you never rode the roller coaster. You could look at every twist and turn and say, well, that one might be scary. Well, maybe this one over here, this turn might be even scarier yet. But you've never actually rode it, so you don't really know until you ride it. Then you know, okay, well, the second turn was the worst. Or it was the best because it was thrilling. It depends upon perspective. But until you experience something, you don't really know. Anytime we just simply read stuff, like I remember, I did the whole thing everybody else probably has done, or so many people has done, where you go to your Bible studies and then they say, do you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior? Do you believe he died on the cross for your salvation, and et cetera, et cetera? And then you say yes, and either they dunk you or they splash you or they do something. Maybe they anoint your third eye with oil and say, welcome, you are now saved. It's all good now. Nothing to worry about from here on out. That couldn't be farther from the truth, because that doesn't change a damn thing. It doesn't change anything. You haven't really experienced anything. You've experienced a ritual in the hopes that it's going to change you. But how often does it really change people? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it might last for a few years. Maybe they are a better person from there out, and they're always trying to be a better person. Everybody's unique. So for some people, that might work enough to get them on the right path, so to speak. But it's not experiential. It's not actually, coming to know Jesus. Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus? Well, have you had a two-way conversation with him? How many people can say that they've had a two-way conversation? It's going to take a meditative state. It's going to take a little work. It's not just, you say a word and everything is great. This is what they're talking about with Gnosis. It's experiential. There's different ways of getting into these states, deep meditation, mantras, and things like fasting. Yeshua fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. Many great spiritual leaders have gone through long periods of fasting because it does kind of cleanse the body, which helps cleanse the soul.
Mm-hmm. Fasting is very important, and Native American, in my understanding of Native American tribes, they do the fasting. This helps them speak clearer to the Great Spirit. And there is something about fasting that clears the body, clears the mind, and brings you closer to your higher self. So there's many different practices. It isn't just, roll out of bed every Sunday, go to some place and say some verses, and then you're done. No, and this is a daily practice that people do to have a deeper understanding. And as you go on life's journey, you have different experiences, you have different perceptions, you have different aha moments. It's all about the ride. It's all about, wow, I've discovered this and I've learned that. But yeah, it's about your discoveries, and we're all different.
Absolutely. And, here's just one representation of the Gnostic cosmos, where you see there's the one, and then you have to the left the Father, the thinking mind, the Mother, the thought, and it goes on down through different grades or gradations, different vibrations, different frequencies. And, we see the ever infamous or famous Yata-Baoth, the demiurge down there in the lower eons. Not everybody agreed. There's different interpretations of the Gnostic universe too. It's just like there's 30,000 different versions of Christianity. It's the same thing in Gnosticism. Not everybody agreed. Some viewed the demiurge as being pure evil. Some think that the demiurge was Yahweh, Yod-He-Vah-He, Jehovah. And others think differently. Some think that Sophia messed up and it was all a huge mistake. Again, many different lines of thought. One thing that did happen was persecutions. At first, after the Council of Nicaea, they started to give you your one official version of Christianity. And then as time went on, they had succeeding councils and they came up with that official version. And then people like the Gnostics and the Cathars and others that came afterwards that didn't believe exactly as the church was saying, the Roman Catholic Church, you were put to death. And many were. Many would not recant. Here's just some of the different sects of Gnosticism out there. Many. There's a listing right here. And you can see some of them, really, when you get down to it, are almost in exact, they're very contrarian with one another. Perhaps believing in the same cast of characters, so to speak, but not believing in the same roles of these casts of characters. But Gnosticism was severely suppressed after the Council of Nicaea. Again, the official church view didn't come about for 300 years after Yeshua walked the earth.
They left out a lot of details. It's like, oh, these minor details over here. Yeah, well, that's not going to change much. Not. The details are very important, to help us learn and grow and express ourselves. And I think they like to use people's fear of things to put us in a box, because if we understand our ability to speak with these beings, these higher vibrational beings, and connect to our higher self, and understand our full potential that we have walking on this planet, that would make us quite uncontrollable.
Yeah, we do know from the discoveries at Nag Hammadi that, some of these books were very, very differently written, just a totally different take on things. Nothing to do with blood sacrifice at all. And even a totally different positioning of the people with, for instance, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And what was Mary's real, role in things? As when we look to that famous painting, we see she's right next to him. And who really was the most beloved of the apostles? What we have gotten from the guides and from Yeshua, channeling Yeshua himself, is that's his other half. And many recognize her as the Shekinah, an embodiment of the divine feminine, so to speak. And she is one of our guides and prefers the name Miriam.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, there's a lot of different information that you receive when you put yourself in that receptive state. We can learn things from these beings that really help us make the most out of the life that we're living today. But if we're afraid to look outside of a certain box, we're not going to make the discoveries that we might otherwise have made if we were not in fear. And this is where I like to encourage people to go beyond, wherever they're at right now. Don't be afraid. Go beyond. Get curious. Ask yourself questions. And go find the answers, because this is your journey and you shouldn't be put in a box just left there. That's not right for the human experience.
What we have gotten is that Yeshua's mission was not a blood sacrifice at all. It was basically teaching the ascension mysteries and getting us ready for the end of the Kali Yuga, and how to get through the thick of the Kali Yuga, how to get through it at its, one of its most deepest, darkest times.
Right. And also giving us an understanding of our abilities, what we can do, what we are made of, giving us a glimpse of the freedom that we can have. But we're not going to have this freedom if we're too afraid to look around and try to figure things out from different perspectives.
Yeah, Carl Jung went deep into Gnosticism and found a lot in it that he could use when he was actually at work. And he said that we are so captivated and entangled by our subjective consciousness that we have simply forgotten the age-old fact that God, Source, speaks chiefly through dreams and visions to each one of us in a unique way. And it should be that way. Why should we take somebody else's word for things? That's the bottom, the big point of Gnosis. Knowing is knowing for yourself. Why take somebody else's word for something when you haven't experienced it yourself? Why trust somebody else's dreams and visions without trusting your own and developing your own ability to recognize when God's source is speaking to you?
Having that ability and setting yourself up with a daily practice to find your center is going to open you up to a lot more experiences and a lot more understandings, and ultimately a better way to live your life. But it doesn't come without giving in to anything. It's that daily practice that helps center you and make yourself receptive to these other energies.
Absolutely. It's a journey, and the Gnostics realized that it's an individual journey in which one size does not fit all. That's the main point. You can only have your own experience. And to accept something from somebody else that might not even be exactly what they experienced themselves thousands of years ago, that's not going to bring any sort of true knowing. That's just accepting what somebody else has written down.
Right. And there is also, who are you receiving information from? Are they centered? Do they have a good practice? Do they have this spiritual hygiene that we talk about? Or were they just in a fight with their partner, their spouse, and kicked the dog and threw the cat and, just drove down the road like a maniac, and here they are giving you a speech? So I think it's just really important to know where your information is coming from. And if nothing else, let it come from you.
So it's the movement, the Gnostic movement, and its literature was almost wiped out by the end of the 5th century CE by Catholic heresy hunters and the Roman army itself. Its beliefs are currently experiencing a rebirth throughout the world, triggered in part by the discovery of the ancient Gnostic library at Nag Hammadi, Egypt in the 40s, and finding of the Gnostic Gospel of Judas at Elminya, Egypt in the 1970s. And so there's many new Gnostic groups popping up all over. A Gnostic Christian church that believes in reincarnation, in the duality of God as both masculine and feminine, and in tenets that explain how we can best advance our souls. There you go. That's really getting to it. It's not about giving power. It's not about begging forgiveness for an ancestor that ate an apple. Again, that's really looking at things in a very overly simplistic point of view. It's something to be experienced through work, effort, and dedication to a spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm. And, everyone might not want to do things a certain way. Everybody should have this choice to be free to experience what are you made of? What does your DNA, what does that speak to you about? What are you curious about? What are you passionate about? What do you want more than anything? What brings you joy? These are all the questions that we need to ask ourselves and have answers to, and not have a third party or a different entity tell us how to feel out of a book.
And so there's some PDFs for you to look at, but the thing I want to take away is that, again, you don't have to believe in anything definitively and always be able to say, I reserve judgment. Weigh things constantly. And if something serves you, wonderful. If it doesn't, then discard it. Move on. This is what we should be doing all the time. And, as we learn deeper, more deeper truths, then we keep growing within. It's all about growth.
So important. And we look at the devices around us, and our devices are actually giving us information. Oh, you should go to bed at this time. Don't you normally go to bed at this time? Look at the beds that we sleep in. They decide, well, what's going to be your most comfortable spot. Look at your phone and all these apps giving you information. Oh, this is stuff that we should know about ourselves, not give that away.
Absolutely. And I find it is interesting that when Cindy looks at the sun, when she's looked up at the sun, she's seen a being in the sun that's very similar to this, very, very similar to this, which is a representation of the demiurge and EAO. Some believe that the demiurge is Yahweh, is the Old Testament jealous, vindictive, God. And some equate Yahweh and Yod-He Vah-He with EAO, with the demiurge, but we've gotten that things are not necessarily so congruous, that there is differences.
Yes, there are differences in them. And if we want to take the demiurge, for example, this is not a good or bad energy. This is an energy that can be used for programming. It's an energy that can be used for
Amplification.
amplification. That's a good way of putting it. So it's all about the intent that you put into this energy.
Absolutely. So you have to be careful because it can be used for good or for evil. And again, just like with the original Masonic lodges, which were basically populated with people that had good innocent intent, and then others that were intent on nothing but just basically making themselves more powerful and using things for their own benefit. It's the same thing with this. And again, it probably is a good idea to think of it as almost analogous to a computer program in some ways. A thing that can be used to, for lack of a better word, level up, amplify, make something more intense, bring something into a more concrete existence. And so, that's that demiurgic. It is a creative energy.
Yes.
And it could be used for either good or evil. So think of it as a program that could be used depending on the intent of the person for positive or negative.
Then we look at these elitists who give us information on how we should believe everything and what we should believe and why we should believe, because they understand how this stuff works. They understand how to use it. And here we are just sort of like, flailing little creatures, and we don't have a deep understanding because we've been taught through their programs how to believe a certain thing, when in reality, the truth is that we are huge creator beings, and there's ways to amplify our life and our energy out there that we're just as much have a right to this as anyone else.
Yeah, Vishnu, when we channel Vishnu, he said that we're all creator gods. And so, we're in many ways creator gods in training, because, again, we want to be very careful about what we create.
That's really important, to be very mindful, to be of a deeper understanding when we're doing this, and when we are understanding these energies, or at least learning about these energies. You just want to be really mindful, and that comes, again, it all keeps circling back to that spiritual practice and bringing yourself into a center of understanding.
Yeah, very interesting. And in this particular one, this is from the Mystica. And again, we look at sources, and I avoid looking at sources unless we're doing a particular video for you guys, because we're at the place where we like to get our information directly from the guides and tune it ourselves intuitively. But it's interesting, here you see Tetragrammaton, the sacred name of God in Hebrew, the four-letter word, the symbol meaning Yod-He-Vah-He, and signifying Yahweh. It's pronounced in Hebrew as Adon. There's a lot of typos here. Adonai, Adonai is really what it should be. And written generally as JHYH with different variations. And in English it became Jehovah. As we were saying, everything's Latinized. Many people still say, well, I'm just going to trust in Jesus. When, again, Yeshua was never called Jesus in his timeline. And in fact, the being of Yeshua was never really put down into the books as Jesus, so to speak, for a long time. Over 1,000 years, had passed. Originally things were written in Aramaic. Some things Aramaic converted to Latin and then converted to English, and again, translations and all. But if we're talking about, again, any sound you have has a particular quality to it. Every sound has a frequency. So you might be saying, Jesus, but it's not the same frequency as Yeshua. They're different frequencies. You could be saying blue, 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 but really, if you're saying it as green, 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 it's not the same thing.
Right. It comes back to that chaotic word that we use when we talk about spelling. Where does that word come from? Spell. So again, the elites, they're hyper aware of this stuff.
Yeah, they have us, greeting everybody in the mornings. Morning, have a good morning. Period. Morning is when you're crying and wailing because somebody's passed on. You think about that. All the language that we have used is being twisted against us. That's why I prefer Sanskrit mantras. They're powerful and they're true, and they're not of this Kali Yuga. They're of a much higher vibrational frequency. But it's interesting here, as he keeps going, he says, this has often been confused with God's introduction of himself to Moses. And he says in Hebrew, Ea Ashur Ea, and which is interpreted as I am that I am. And here he says the introduction was derived from the god Abraham, or Father Brahman, who introduced himself as in Sanskrit as Tat Sat, and I am that this is. Tat Sat. Tat Sat is I am that, basically, yeah. Interesting, and we wonder why is Brahma not worshipped? Well, there's a story that goes along with that. And, a fupa, a demiurgic kind of, thing with Brahman, in which he's no longer worshipped anymore because of an error, so to speak. Interesting, is it not? And then, of course, people have made the connection between Abraham and Sarah and Brahma and Sarasvati. And again, the Vedic scriptures are much older than the Abrahamic. And again, the Abrahamic is basically, it's piecemealing together all sorts of different sources into one story that they could use. This is the controller's story. When we look at the Abrahamic tradition, it's the controller's version of things.
And a lot of people get really upset because they think that, we don't have the right belief, when in reality, Mike and I have both spent many years, me doing what I could to understand the Bible, Mike going through every Bible and religion there is out there, and finally coming to the understanding that, hey, maybe it's not what they say it is, because there's just too many things wrong here. And finally coming to the understanding that it's important what my heart feels.
Absolutely. Well, I did go through all the, studying of it and going with, really good friends and going to their churches and then pulling them to other churches, wanting to experience every single church I could pretty much. It was just part of my path, and I enjoyed it. I loved, interacting with people of different faiths, and we met wonderful people of many different faiths, had all sorts of different seders and meals and Shabbats, and it was wonderful. Because, again, it's not really about the dogma, it's about the love that's behind that. It's about the fellowship that's behind it. But when dogma becomes divisive, then it's time to let go of the dogma. And so it's time to go higher and really lift ourselves up in vibration. I always felt that the fundamentalist mainstream point of view never sat right. It always seemed like it was just not right. It's not the way things are. I could tell it isn't, but I still just wanted to go through and experience and delve deeper. So, again, sitting Shiva, when people are mourning the loss of somebody. Again, there's this period of time where, in Jewish tradition, you're sitting Shiva. Again, Shiva, god of death and destruction, just one aspect. Because again, it's also, Shiva is also the destroyer of the illusion of the separateness of the self.
Right. That's really important to acknowledge, the destroyer of the illusion, the illusion of all of this that they've placed in front of us. And, I went to church. I volunteered Sunday school. I wanted to be like the best church mom. I meant well. But every time I went to Bible study, it's like something just never set right. It's like this seed, that's stuck, or a sliver that's just not quite right. And until you remove that and look around and have a full understanding for yourself, it's not going to sit right, because I think a lot of people do have an understanding that there's something off.
And yet, there is this something that makes us want to connect when it comes. And we want to have a connection through God's source. And that's because every single being that comes into this universe has not only source in them, but they also have an aspect and energy from the creator of this universe, which is not necessarily the same being. Again, these creator gods, so to speak, there are many creator gods out there. And so somebody had said, I thought that, the creator gods were in the sun. Well, those are smaller creator gods. There's all different types of beings out there. And in the Deva kingdom is expansive. So you have little elementals that's entire purpose. And many of us, there is a line of thinking that we all start out as an elemental being. We all start out as, an elemental being per se, and then go on up through all the different species and forms of life that we see. So you might have actually began existence as an elemental being inside a crystal. Or, graduate to a being that's actually taking care of the life of a single flower. That's your entire purpose, taking care of that one flower. And then from there, perhaps you become a tree. And then from there, the soul might migrate and become a fish, a bird, an animal, on up the line as it goes and becomes a human. And then from a human, starts to become something more. Perhaps it goes along an angelic path, or a path of what we would call a deva or a god, and just moving on up the line of spiritual evolution, not Darwinian evolution. Very, very different.
All these different aspects of source are all equally important. I don't feel like there's like necessarily a higher or a lower, but I think that there's an energy of discovery that might be able to be expanded or reduced in a way.
Absolutely. And so the mothering aspect is just perhaps the most comforting aspect that there is. Whether we're talking to the mother aspect as Shekinah, as Sophia, as Lakshmi, as Aset, as White Buffalo Calf Woman, as Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene. I mean, Ananda Mayama, we could go on to all these different beautiful beings of all different transitions, and they're all carrying that divine feminine spark inside them, the spark of the mother, which is absolute love and compassion for her children.
Yes, and when we start to discover this energy and we put this out there for other people and begin to first give ourselves the love and compassion and any forgiveness that might be necessary. And then when your cup is full or your soul feels complete, then you're able to start giving this mothering energy to those that are around you and starting to create. You are your own hub of genuine love and compassion. And this is how things bloom naturally. This is how things grow organically.
Yes. So most definitely to recap again, with the Gnostic point of view, there's no one point of view. There's many different points of view, just like there is in Christianity, even when it comes to the Demiurge. And again, we've gotten that it's almost more like a computer program, so to speak. It's something that can amplify and bring into manifestation things that the person that's using it, and you could use the demiurgic energy just by a simple invocation of E-A-O, which is I, A, and O, but you just resonate it outwards. And, we've experimented with this. I've done mantra of just EAO and ask Cindy, and what is she seeing? And you see everything just starts getting more powerful.
More expansive. And I just, when I see the demiurge, if I could just explain what I see, this is really curious, is it's like a cloud of energy. And then all I can think of is, you know how on the 3D and then the ether, they're always making something that is synthetic, I feel that this is the organic part, and then the synthetic part is the cloud that they have created, if that makes sense. Did I explain that well?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Any comments, please do share. As always, any questions, please do share. Let us know what you want to see more of, too, because, we love talking like this. Is there anything that you can get from Sophia or any of the guides that they want to include in this video?
Very much. They are really asking me to ask you guys to fulfill yourself first. Fulfill what you need, what you desire. Take care of you first. And they just want you to understand that when it's time, that cup is going to overflow, and it's going to overflow into other people. And this is that mother energy that we need. This is how we bring things back into balance, as it starts with you. And they're do want to channel through you and give you their love and understanding and wisdom and experience. And this is where we start. It starts with you.
So reach out to any of them that you feel comfortable with and just do a mantra to them. We've covered many of them. Just, take a look at our mantra list. There's somewhere in the mid-30s. And just connect with them. And they would love to connect with you. What mother doesn't want to just, look and help, her child?
Mm-hmm. And right now, what I feel bursting is the heart chakra and also the throat chakra. So these are two things that they are going to come in and be able to work on immediately, is the heart chakra, throat chakra. And from there, all things can become what they're supposed to be, what they were meant to be.
Absolutely. So as always, guys, thank you for your support on Patreon and Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi, you could do a one-time donation to support the channel, or monthly, just like on Patreon, and you could do it in $5 increments, so it does definitely keep us going. And then Medicinal Foods, use coupon code EEA. Lots of great products help you detox, boost your immune system. It does support the channel as well. Much love. May you guys be blessed with the blessings of the mothers, and may your light shine brightly.
Indeed. Source bless and namaste.